Submarines ruled the Atlantic in the early years of the war, a period the Germans called the happy time. Convoys burned, tonnage sank, and U-boat captains became national heroes. But in March 1941, that dominance ended in just 10 days. Within that brief span, 3 of Germany's greatest submarine commanders were gone. 1 missing, 1 dead, 1 captured. The blow shattered morale and shifted the balance of the Atlantic War, and was so severe that Berlin kept the truth hidden for weeks. These 10 days marked a turning point. This was the U-boats' darkest hour. These dark 10 days for the U-boats began on March 7, 1941, when U-47 was patrolling off the west coast of Ireland. U-47 was commanded by Captain Lieutenant Günther Prien, also known as the Bull of Scapa Flow, because 2 years earlier, in the opening months of the war, Prien had done the unthinkable. On the night of October 13, 1939, he threaded his submarine through the narrow, tide-ribbed channels of Orkney Islands and slipped into Scapa Flow, the supposedly impregnable heart of the Royal Navy. At anchor lay HMS Royal Oak, a 29,000-ton battleship and pride of the British fleet. At 12:58 AM, torpedoes slammed into her side. Within minutes, the ship rolled and sank, taking 833 men with her. By dawn, U-47 was gone, vanishing into the North Sea. When Prien returned to Wilhelmshaven, he was greeted as a national saviour. Hitler awarded him with the Knight's Cross in person, his photograph appeared in postcards, he was presented as a perfect German hero, disciplined, humble and deadly. He showed that Germany's U-boats could threaten the might of the British naval fleet. For the next 16 months, Prien lived up to his legend. He commanded with precision, preferring stealth over spectacle. His crew adorned him, firm but fair, confident yet never boastful. Between 1939 and 1941, he launched 10 patrols, sinking more than 30 ships and nearly 200,000 tons of Allied shipping. British sailors whispered his name like a curse. Among the U-boat crews, it became a promise. If you follow Prien's example, you'd never fail. But by early 1941, the Atlantic was changing. The Allies were growing wiser and better equipped. Air patrols reached further from shore, escort groups coordinated their attacks through new wireless tactics, radar and sonar grew sharper with each month. Prien, ever confident, was undeterred. On February 20th, U-47 departed for her 11th patrol. The crew, veterans all, treated it as routine. They had done this before, they trusted their captain absolutely. But even as they dove into the depths, the British were closing the net. In the first days of March, Prien's U-boat shadowed convoy OB-293, westbound from Liverpool. The weather was foul, high seas, poor visibility, sleet whipping the bridge. On the night of March 7th, U-47 struck. A British tanker exploded into flames. Prien sent his final radio message. Another successful attack. Then, nothing. The destroyer HMS Wolverine recorded a sonar contact and dropped depth charges, later claiming a kill. Hours afterward, the sea was calm again, and only scattered debris and traces of oil on the surface. The Admiralty credited Wolverine with destroying the U-boat, but no wreck or survivors were ever found. Back in France, silence was the first sign that something was wrong. Prien's reports had always been punctual. Admiral Donitz, commander of the U-boat arm, waited through the night for an update that never came. When the second night passed, he ordered radio calls to all boats in the sector. U-47 did not respond. And as Donitz stared at the blank space where U-47's signal should have been, he could not have known that this was just the beginning of the U-boat's darkest hour. 10 days after Prien's disappearance, 2 of his closest rivals and Germany's pride and joy were already closing in on another convoy. In the early hours of March 17, 1941, U-100 under Joachim Schepke stalked convoy HX-112 through the black Atlantic swells. The weather was savage, freezing wind, sleet, and visibility near zero. But Schepke thrived in such conditions. He was a consummate showman of the U-boat arm. Tall, blonde, and camera-ready, the very image of the daring naval hero. Barely 29, he had become a fixture in Germany propaganda, grinning in newsreels, cigarette in hand, exuding effortless confidence. Yet behind the charm was a razor-edged ego and a ferocious will to dominate. Schepke had built his legend on boldness. He preferred to fight on the surface, where his crew could breathe and maneuver freely, often attacking in plain sight of his enemies. That audacity made him one of the most successful U-boat commanders of the war. He claimed 37 ships sunk, over 200,000 tons of Allied shipping, though the confirmed figure was 36. Even so, for a time he led the entire fleet in tonnage destroyed. Fellow U-boat commanders joked about Schepke tonnage, teasing his tendency to round up his totals, but none doubted his nerve. Albert Donitz himself had awarded him the Knight's Cross with oak leaves and hailed him as the living spirit of the U-boat Waffe. Now, in the roaring Atlantic, Schepke sought one more triumph. At just after midnight, U-100 closed to attack range. Through his periscope, flashes of gunfire and burning oil lit the night. Convoy HX-112 was already under siege. Schepke then fired a spread of torpedoes and swung to reposition, but fate had turned against him. The destroyer HMS Vanek had already locked onto U-100 using the new secret weapon of the Royal Navy, shipborne radar. It was the first time in history radar had been used successfully against a submarine in combat. U-100 dove as Vanek gave chase. Depth charges thundered through the sea. U-100 bucked and shuddered under the blast. Electrical systems failed, water sprayed through the ruptured seals. Schepke ordered evasive maneuvers, diving and turning, but the escorts never lost contact. With pressure rising and the hull groaning, he gave orders to surface. At 3:40 AM, U-100 burst from the depths less than 400 meters from Vanek. The British destroyer rammed her at full speed, crushing the conning tower and shearing metal like paper. The submarine began to flood instantly. Schepke, standing on the bridge, was hurled forward and killed instantly. 6 men were pulled from the sea, the rest went down with their captain. For the U-boat Waffe, the loss of Joachim Schepke, the Golden Boy, was a devastating blow. But the night's battle was not yet over. Further west, U-99 was still in action under Otto Kretschmer, Schepke's counterpart in fame, though his opposite in temperament. Where Schepke courted attention, Kretschmer avoided it. A quiet, analytical man, he approached war like a mathematician. His motto, one torpedo, one ship, summed up his philosophy. He demanded discipline and perfection, drilling his crew endlessly to achieve both. To them, he was not charismatic, but infallible. By March 1941, Kretschmer was the Kriegsmarine's most successful commander, with over 270,000 tons of shipping sunk, more than any other U-boat ace in history. Donitz saw him as a model officer, precise, calm, and utterly without ego. And at HX-112, his skill was on full display. In a single night, he had devastated a convoy, his attacks sinking 5 ships and crippling 2 more. It was his masterpiece, and his last. As Kretschmer attempted to withdraw from the slaughter, the British escorts turned their attention to him. HMS Walker and HMS Vanek, the same ship that destroyed U-100 hours earlier, now swept the waters with sonar. Contact was gained, and depth charges rained down. The detonations battered U-99, disabling her electrical power and jamming the diving planes. Kretschmer tried to slip deeper, down to 230 meters, but the pressure hull began to leak and the compressed air system failed. Knowing the end was near, Kretschmer ordered the boat to surface. When U-99 broke through the waves, searchlights immediately pinned her in their glare. Escape was impossible. Kretschmer ordered sculling charges set and told his crew to abandon ship. As the men leapt into the freezing sea, the British hauled 40 survivors aboard, including their captain. Calm and composed, Kretschmer identified himself to Donald McIntyre as commander of U-99. Minutes later, his submarine sank beneath the waves. Kretschmer's capture ended the career of Germany's most successful U-boat commander. His loss, coming only hours of Schepke's death, completed a disastrous 10 days for the U-boat arm and marked the end of Germany's early dominance in the Battle of the Atlantic. The Royal Navy wasted no time capitalizing on the moment. British aircraft dropped leaflets over occupied ports and coastal towns, bearing the mocking question, "Where is Prien?" The message was unmistakable. The invisible U-boat aces were dead or captured, and the tide of the Battle of the Atlantic was beginning to turn. The Kriegsmarine and the propaganda ministry kept the truth from the public. Prien and Schepke were still mentioned in radio reports and newspapers as if alive, while Kretschmer was quietly listed as missing. Their losses were not officially acknowledged until weeks later, and then only in vague, heroic terms. The goal was to preserve morale and sustain the myth of U-boat invincibility. For Admiral Donitz, the reality was clear. The morale of a submarine arm faltered, and Allied confidence grew. The success of convoy HX-112 signaled a turning point in the Battle of the Atlantic. The age of the untouchable U-boat ace had ended. And if you want to learn about the only time a submarine sunk another submarine while both were submerged, check out this video.